The bereaved tycoon's twin daughters had been completely restless until the arrival of the new African-American caregiver who implemented a change that altered the situation entirely. "That lady is medicating the kids." The claim from Gloria, the domestic manager, resounded across the grand foyer of the Whitmore estate like a thunderclap. "Mr. James, it's implausible that two youngsters who stayed up all evening are now dozing as if they're in a deep slumber. She's engaging in unlawful actions with those little ones." Keisha Williams, merely 28 years of age, remained still in the midst of the polished marble foyer, observing the 60-year-old domestic manager gesture emphatically before her boss. The allegations didn't catch her off guard. Indeed, she had foreseen this exact scenario 3 weeks prior, when she accepted the role of tending to the 4-year-old twins who had frightened away caregivers for half a year. James Whitmore, property magnate and grief-stricken widower, glanced alternately at his long-serving domestic manager and the youthful African-American caregiver, who had turned his residence from a zone of perpetual cries into a haven of tranquility. For the initial time following his spouse's passing, his daughters Ruby and Rose slumbered soundly for 8 hours each night. "Gloria, those are grave charges," he whispered, evidently uneasy about the circumstances. "Serious, Mr. James. This individual came here from the edges of Detroit without solid endorsements." Gloria hurled the terms like venom, and abruptly our girls who wailed from bad dreams every evening rest as if they're logs. Something is seriously amiss. Keisha inhaled deeply, her gaze momentarily connecting with James. There was an element in that glance. It wasn't merely appreciation for the serenity she had introduced to the household, but a real interest in her true identity. Why would a lady with her sophisticated schooling and remarkable understanding of youth growth accept a position that caused other caregivers to flee in distress? 3 weeks before, when the staffing firm phoned proposing her assistance, he had been in dire need. 6 caregivers had departed in under 2 months. Ruby and Rose, scarred by their mother's abrupt demise in an automobile mishap, passed their evenings shrieking, sobbing, declining to rest. The whole residence was exhausted. Gloria had consistently voiced her views on those sorts of individuals handling children from respectable households. But when Keisha appeared that initial afternoon, something shifted immediately. The twins, typically antagonistic toward outsiders, neared her with interest. And that initial evening, wonder, they dozed for 6 hours without interruption. "Cameras!" Gloria faltered, obviously not anticipating that response. "Well, that's not required if she simply actually," Keisha cut in, retrieving her mobile from her pouch. "I've already captured some of our evening procedures to record the girls' advancement. Would you care to view?" There was total quiet. James observed a slight alteration in Gloria's demeanor, from rebellion to something akin to alarm. There in the heart of that foyer, where heiress of affluent families had decided on the destinies of staff, Keisha remained steadfast, protecting secrets too potent to be disclosed prematurely. If this tale of bias masked as worry moved you, remember to join the channel, because what transpired afterward would demonstrate that undervaluing individuals due to their looks can be the gravest error of your existence. Gloria was unwilling to retreat. In her 15 years serving the Whitmore family, she had established a name for unassailable devotion, and she wouldn't permit an exploiter to ruin her favored status in the household. "Mr. James, you must comprehend what's occurring here," she persisted, approaching the window facing the yard where Ruby and Rose were frolicking for the first time in months. "This lady emerges from obscurity with no appropriate endorsements from honorable families, and suddenly she possesses enchanting abilities with kids. Please." James observed his daughters dashing freely over the grass, their giggles resounding for the first time since their mother's burial. It was undeniable, the shift. They were consuming meals consistently, resting 8 hours nightly, and had even resumed kindergarten without anxiety episodes. "Gloria, perhaps you're exaggerating." Evidently the girls are being controlled," the domestic manager interjected, her tone escalating. "And you fail to notice it because you're eager for a fix. But I recognize her kind. They appear modest, execute short-term wonders, and then begin requesting privileges. First an increase, then costly presents for her relatives, then entry to his finances. Kesha stayed immobile, viewing Gloria's theatrical display with a peaceful countenance that only aggravated the domestic manager further. In truth, that response was precisely what she had anticipated from the start. 3 weeks prior, when she alighted from the bus at the edge of the Whitmore estate, Keisha was aware of what she was entering. Raised in Detroit, the child of a janitor who served rich families, she had seen the identical pattern numerous times. Long-standing staff safeguarding their domain against newcomers, particularly when those newcomers didn't match the correct image. What Gloria was unaware of was that Keisha Williams possessed a graduate degree in youth psychology from the University of Michigan, had served as a child injury advisor at 3 medical centers, and had selected this role for very particular motives unrelated to finances. "Yo, you know what irritates me the most?" Gloria proceeded, now evidently losing her poise. "It's her composure. An ordinary lady would be anxious being charged with medicating kids, but observe her. She's positioned there as if she possesses knowledge we lack." James furrowed his brow. He had to concede that Gloria's remark held some validity. Keisha did exhibit an almost unsettling assurance, like someone ahead by several moves. "In fact," Keisha stated gently, "I do possess knowledge you lack." The hush was complete. Gloria blanched a bit, as though she had summoned something she wasn't ready to confront. "I know Ruby rouses at 2:30 a.m. because she envisions she's plummeting just as her mother did when the vehicle overturned." Keisha went on, her tone staying steady. "I know that Rose can't doze until she verifies all the entrances are secured, because in her mind, the residence isn't secure anymore since Mom departed and didn't return." James experienced a shiver along his back. How did she know such precise details about his daughter's bad dreams? He had never shared with anyone about the incident about how Amanda had been discovered. "I also know," Keisha proceeded, now gazing straight at Gloria, "that you've been informing the other caregivers in the area that this family requires someone of similar societal level to tend to the girls. Very intriguing communications in the upscale household workers messaging group, aren't they?" Gloria's countenance shifted from pale to flushed in moments. "How did you? I never—" "Oh, but you did. You even implied that I was likely here to deceive the solitary widower. That's a verbatim quote from your communications last Thursday." James pivoted gradually to Gloria, a look of incredulity forming on his face. "Is this accurate?" the domestic manager stuttered, obviously in distress. "How did this lady gain entry to her private communications? And what did How did she appear to know precisely which triggers to activate?" Keisha stayed composed, but her gaze sparkled with something Gloria. Here was a lady who not only knew her secrets, but had arrived ready for this precise clash. "The reality, Mr. Whitmore, is that I accepted this role because your family requires far more than merely a caregiver. And Gloria," she grinned gently, "has been vigorously obstructing any genuine advancement in this residence for far longer than you comprehend." For the first time since he had encountered the domestic manager, James perceived real dread in her eyes. And for the first time since he had employed Keisha, he started to suspect that there was much more to this serene lady than was apparent. Every charge Gloria leveled only seemed to fortify something within Keisha, a quiet resilience that expanded in direct ratio to the unfairness being attempted upon her, as if every instance of disdain was energizing a scheme much grander than any of those present could conceive. "Do you wish to learn the truth about what's transpiring in this residence?" Keisha inquired, her tone preserving that steady timbre that was beginning to disturb even James. "Then, let's commence from the very onset." She approached the sideboard and retrieved a leather portfolio that James had never observed before. "Gloria, are you certain you want to persist with these charges? Because once I unveil this portfolio, there's no retreating." The alarm in the domestic manager's eyes was nearly tangible now. "Mr. James, she's attempting to frighten us. This is precisely the sort of controlling conduct I was referring to." But James observed, captivated by the metamorphosis occurring before him, The lady he had hired as a caregiver was disclosing levels of intricacy that entirely contradicted his assumptions. Keisha wasn't merely courteous. She was tactical. She wasn't just capable, she was imposing. 3 weeks ago, when I accepted this role, Keisha proceeded, unveiling the portfolio. It wasn't because I required employment. It was because I received a very intriguing contact from someone you know well. She extracted an audio clip from her device. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the child specialist who has been attending to Ruby and Rose for 2 years. She reached out to me after Gloria phoned to doubt my professional ability before I even began working here. James felt a shiver down his back. Gloria, you contacted the girl's specialist. I merely wanted to verify if she knew this individual. Gloria faltered, realizing she had tumbled into a snare she didn't even realize existed. Keisha activated the playback. Dr. Coleman's distinct voice resounded in the space. Gloria, I must inform you something. Keisha Williams is not simply an ordinary caregiver. She holds a graduate degree in youth psychology and focuses on child injury. When I learned she had taken on the Whitmore twins, I was curious. A specialist of her level doesn't accept household work from necessity. The quiet that ensued was interrupted only by the subdued noise of kids frolicking in the yard. James regarded Keisha as if he were viewing her anew. You possess a graduate degree, University of Michigan. I served at Detroit Children's Hospital for 5 years before launching my own child injury center. Keisha grinned softly. The query, Mr. Whitmore, is why would a psychologist specializing in injury shut down a thriving center to serve as a caregiver? Gloria was clearly in distress now. That doesn't add up. If you're so skilled, why? Why did I accept a role that compensates a tenth of what I previously earned? Keisha completed the query. Because it wasn't about the finances, Gloria. It was about fairness. She extracted a sequence of papers from her case. 6 months ago, James, you dismissed a staff member from your firm for cultural mismatch. Do you recall Marcus Johnson, the African-American engineer who designed your newest housing development? James furrowed his brow, evidently uneasy. Marcus, yes, there were some problems. The problems were that Gloria recommended to your personnel director that staff like him might not align with the Whitmore persona. Keisha positioned a paper on the surface. Email dated March 3rd, duplicated to 5 individuals on the panel. Gloria blanched. How do you have entry to internal firm emails? Because after Marcus was dismissed, I commenced methodically examining the dismissal trends at your firm. I found that Gloria was in frequent communication with 5 people in your personnel department, always providing observations about staff based on insights she gathered during social occasions and family assemblies. Keisha directed her attention to the domestic manager. Because individuals like you function in the obscurity, murmuring toxin into the ears of those with authority, sowing doubts about the ability of people you deem inappropriate. Gloria attempted one final desperate ploy. Mr. James, she's here to injure us. It's a setup. She orchestrated all of this. You're correct, Gloria. I orchestrated it all. Keisha grinned. But there was something hazardous about that grin. But not to injure anyone. I orchestrated it to reveal the truth about how bias functions in families like this. How it infiltrates everything from home choices to business ones. She retrieved her device and displayed a series of communications. All of our dialogues over the past 21 days have been captured with legal approval. I notified you on my initial day that I would be recording my efforts for professional reasons. Every racial remark, every sabotage effort, every tide. Me, you attempted to meddle in my connection with the kids, James observed Gloria collapse before him. The lady he had esteemed as a foundation of his residence had been methodically revealed as someone who functioned from profound and perilous biases. The twins are dozing because they finally have someone who comprehends childhood injury tending to them, Keisha stated. Not because they're being dosed, but because they're being attended to by a skilled expert who identifies the indicators of unresolved sorrow in young kids. She sealed the portfolio and gazed directly at James. The query now is, what are you going to do with this data? Are you going to persist in permitting individuals like Gloria to sway your choices about staff and about your own daughters? At that instant, Ruby and Rose dashed through the entrance, their faces rosy from play. "Daddy Keisha, we discovered a bird's nest in the oak tree." The kids' beaming purity contrasted sharply with the dense strain in the atmosphere. Keisha crouched to welcome them, and James observed as his daughters embraced her with the assurance that had taken months to build with any grown-up after their mother's demise. For a moment, as he viewed the scene, his daughters finally joyful. The domestic manager he had relied on exposed as biased, and the lady who had rescued his family disclosing herself as someone pursuing fairness for her own sibling. James comprehended he was at the core of a lesson about how advantage and authority can be utilized both to sustain unfairness and to rectify it. But what neither James nor Gloria knew yet was that Keisha had recorded much more than dialogues and communications. She had uncovered links between Gloria's household bias and Whitmore's business customs that extended far beyond his sibling's case. Links that, once disclosed, would not only demolish a profession, but potentially reshape the way the entire commercial elite of the city considered social accountability and the repercussions of their biases. The twins' arrival briefly shattered the strain, but Keisha knew that this was precisely the instant she had been anticipating for weeks. "Ruby Rose, how about displaying Daddy and Gloria the illustration you created yesterday about our evening procedure?" The girls dashed excitedly to retrieve their illustrations, leaving the three grown-ups in a weighty hush. Gloria seized the instant to attempt one final desperate assault. "Mr. James, she's even controlling the kids." This is evidence that Gloria Keisha cut in gently, retrieving her tablet. "Are you certain you want to proceed? Because we still have 15 minutes of footage from Ruby's birthday celebration last month when you informed Mrs. Henderson that individuals like me shouldn't have access to kids from conventional families." Gloria's face shifted from flushed to a ghostly white. The birthday celebration had been a significant social gathering with at least 20 elite families present. "If those recordings became public, I also have your communications to the Premium Executive Caregivers messaging group," Keisha proceeded, scrolling through the display where you distributed images of me without approval, conjecturing about my real motives with the family. James approached, taking the tablet from Keisha's grasp. His features stiffened as he perused the communications. "Gloria, you distributed images of my daughter's caregiver with outsiders discussing our private existence. Mr. James, I was merely being vigilant." "Vigilant?" James's tone escalated. "You breached my family's privacy, disseminated personal data, and even had the boldness to meddle in my business choices based on racial bias." Keisha observed the interaction with managed contentment. She had orchestrated each disclosure meticulously, knowing that James's pride as a parent and entrepreneur would be the most potent tool against Gloria's harmful sway. "But there's more," she stated, opening another portfolio on her tablet. "Gloria, do you recall suggesting the termination of 3 African-American staff from Whitmore in the last 2 years?" Always with apparently technical rationales, the hush was complete. James regarded his domestic manager as if he were viewing her anew. "Jennifer Watson, financial expert, terminated after Gloria implied that individuals like her might not align with the firm's conservative corporate atmosphere. David Miller, designer, relocated to the least esteemed division after Gloria remarked on his appropriateness for the customer profile. And my sibling Marcus, naturally." "How do you have entry to this confidential data?" James inquired, truly perplexed. "Because after Marcus was terminated, I began systematically probing the termination patterns at your firm. I discovered that Gloria was in regular communication with 5 individuals in your personnel department, always providing insights about staff based on observations she made during social events and family gatherings." Keisha displayed a detailed chart. "Over the past 3 years, 16 African American or Latino staff have been terminated or demoted from Whitmore Industries. In 60% of the instances, there was an email or call from Gloria in the records, always suggesting cultural issues or queries about suitability for the setting. James collapsed into a seat, passing his hands through his hair. "My God, Gloria, is this accurate?" The domestic manager finally crumbled. I merely wanted to safeguard the family's standing. Individuals like her don't grasp our principles, our heritage, our principles." James erupted. "What principles are those?" "Bias, prejudice, ruining the lives of capable individuals based on their skin tone." At that moment, Ruby and Rose dashed back with their illustrations. "Look, it's Kesha narrating us a tale," proclaimed Rose, displaying a vibrant illustration of an African-American lady seated between two kids, all grinning. "And here she is, instructing us about the stars," appended Ruby, displaying another illustration where Keisha indicated the heavens while the girls gazed upward in awe. The purity of the illustrations contrasted harshly with the venomous reality that had been revealed in the space. James regarded his daughters, finally content, finally dozing well, finally assured, and comprehended the extent of the unfairness he had permitted to thrive under his own roof. "Gloria," he stated, his tone now managed but unyielding, "you're terminated. I want you out of this residence today. Mr. James, please. 15 years of service. 15 years swaying my choices with bias," he rectified. 15 years undermining capable staff. 15 years poisoning the atmosphere of my home and my firm. Keisha retrieved one final portfolio from her materials. "James, there's one more thing you need to know. Gloria didn't just sway terminations, she also obstructed hires. She displayed him a sequence of resumes. 23 highly skilled candidates were declined in the last 2 years after Gloria conducted informal verifications on their families and histories. Among them were 2 engineers with qualifications from MIT, an acclaimed designer, and an expert with an MBA from Harvard. All African American or Latino," James observed, examining the resumes. "Professionals who could have added substantially to the firm." "Exactly." Meanwhile, less skilled candidates who matched Gloria's appropriate profile were employed at higher compensations and in superior roles. Gloria made one final, desperate effort. "Mr. James, she orchestrated this all. It's a plot against me." "Plot?" Keisha chuckled gently. "Gloria, it would be a plot if I had fabricated your words, falsified your emails, invented your messaging communications. All I did was record and arrange your own actions." James directed his attention to his daughters, who were observing the strain among the grown-ups with bewilderment. "Girls, how about we venture to the yard while the grown-ups conclude conversing?" When the kids departed, he confronted Gloria one final time. "You have 1 hour to gather your belongings. I don't want to see you on this property again." "What about the firm?" Keisha inquired. James inhaled deeply. "Tomorrow morning, I'll perform a full review of the employment and termination procedures for the last 3 years. All impacted staff will be reached with proposals of reinstatement or recompense." Gloria staggered out of the space, utterly vanquished. 15 years of sway and authority had disintegrated in less than an hour in the face of her own proof of discriminatory behavior. Keisha observed the domestic manager depart, feeling a profound but managed contentment. It wasn't malice. It was pure fairness delivered with exact precision. "Why?" James inquired when they were solitary. "Why endure all this effort? Come here, tend to my daughters, confront all this bias just to reveal Gloria." "Because unfairness unchallenged is unfairness continued," Keisha responded simply. "And because Ruby and Rose merit to mature in a setting where ability matters more than skin tone." But there was one final disclosure that neither James nor Gloria knew yet. A finding Keisha had made about the genuine links between Gloria's household bias and a much larger web of systematic exclusion that stretched throughout the city's commercial elite, and that was about to transform not just one family, but an entire business culture based on unquestioned advantage. 6 months later, the change in the Whitmore twins' lives only a minor portion of a much grander revolution that Keisha had discreetly arranged. Marcus Johnson sat in his new workspace at Whitmore Industries, now as overseer of sustainable growth, a role created specifically to utilize his knowledge in inclusive residential initiatives. The compensation was 40% greater than his prior one, and he had received an ownership interest in the firm as recompense for his months of joblessness. "I still can't believe my sister accomplished all this," he informed James during one of their weekly discussions, which now encompassed talks about corporate variety. "She orchestrated every step for months." James grinned, gazing out the window at the new communal garden the firm had established on the empty plot adjacent, an initiative guided by 3 of the staff who had been reinstated after the review. "Your sister didn't just rescue my daughters, she rescued my firm from becoming outdated in a world that no longer endures systematic bias." The complete review had disclosed an even more widespread pattern than James had envisioned. 23 staff were reinstated or compensated suitably. 5 overseers who had actively engaged in the discriminatory customs were terminated. The firm implemented a new anonymous employment protocol where applications were assessed without images or names that could disclose ethnic background. Gloria, for her part, discovered that 15 years of sway based on bias did not construct a sturdy professional web. None of the elite families re-employed her after Keisha's recordings spread discreetly in the caregivers' messaging groups. She was now employed at a franchise inn, earning less than half of what she had at the Whitmore estate. "The most remarkable thing," James proceeded, "is that she never aimed to demolish anyone. She aimed to transform the system." Keisha had refused James's proposal to become a permanent advisor for the firm. Instead, she utilized her documented experience to launch a advisory company specializing in spotting and correcting institutional prejudice. Her initial client was a Detroit medical network facing legal actions over racial bias in patient attention. Ruby and Rose, now 5, attended a more varied school that James had selected specifically to expand their horizons. Keisha still visited them twice weekly, no longer as a caregiver, but as Aunt Keisha, the lady who had converted bad dreams into serene slumbers and taught them that families are constructed on affection, not bias. "Daddy, is Aunt Keisha attending my birthday?" Rose inquired over breakfast, wearing the star pendant she never removed. "Of course, Princess." "And your Uncle Marcus, too," James answered, still astonished at how natural it felt to call Keisha's sibling family. The true gauge of Keisha's achievement was not in the remarkable figures of her advisory firm or the 23 staff she had assisted in getting re-employed at Whitmore Industries. It was in the contact she received the week prior from a young African-American mother in Chicago who had viewed her discussion on a social fairness broadcast. "My 6-year-old son is being discriminated against at school," the lady stated. "The instructors say he's problematic, but I know he's intelligent." "Can you assist me record what's occurring?" Keisha grinned, retrieving a new journal. "Let's commence from the onset. Tell me everything you've observed, because the finest retribution isn't demolishing those who harmed you. It's constructing bridges where there were barriers, creating chances where there was exclusion, and converting anguish into objective." James Whitmore learned that advantage without consciousness is a hazardous tool, but advantage with objective can rewrite entire chronicles. Gloria attempted to utilize bias as authority, but discovered that animosity always constructs sand fortresses. Keisha utilized intellect as fairness and constructed a heritage that will endure for generations. If this tale of change through bravery has moved your spirit, join the channel, because sometimes altering the world begins with one individual.